In Barbados, the Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel held high-level meetings as part of his Caribbean tour to further strengthen relations and cooperation with the region. Ukraine attacks on Russian airfields resumed as drone caused a fire at the Kursk airfield in western Russia. And also in the Democratic Republic of the Congo have raised the death toll in the massacre committed by the insurgent group M23 to 2,072 victims. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. On Monday, Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez held high-level meetings with Barbados as part of his Caribbean tour. Upon his arrival, the Cuban president went to the State House to pay a courtesy visit to his Barbadian counterpart, Sandra Mason. Cuban diplomatic sources confirmed that during the meeting, both ratified the will to continue strengthening the historic ties of friendship and cooperation that unite both nations. Diaz-Canel's agenda in this capital city included a meeting with Prime Minister Mia Amor Motley at her official residence, with whom the president held private talks. Also, the parties signed a memorandum of understanding on technological cooperation. The Cuban president said on Twitter that his visit will be an opportunity to further advance relations with his nation and Caribbean countries at the 8th CARICOM-Cuba Summit to be on Tuesday. In Caracas, ALBA TCP Executive General Sasha Laurenti held a meeting on Monday with the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. On his Twitter account, Laurenti said this was a fruitful meeting in which he highlighted that unilateral coercive measures are an obstacle for peace and development. The ALBA TCP Secretary General also expressed rejection for the kidnapping of the Venezuelan diplomat Alex Saab, who was arrested in mid-2020 in Cabo Verde and extradited to the United States. The diplomat was trying to acquire food and other supplies on behalf of the Venezuelan government to mitigate the effects of the U.S. blockade against Venezuela.
The kidnapping of diplomat Alex Saab has been an aggression, not only against him as a person, not only against the government and the people of Venezuela. It has also been an aggression against all diplomacy. We send our solidarity to his family. We were with his wife. And we are willing to do everything we can to set him free.
And now we update information in Argentina, shaken by the scandal involving magistrates, prosecutors, businesspersons, and politicians. President Alberto Fernandez, in view of the seriousness of the situation, instructed the Minister of Justice, Martín Soria, to initiate a criminal investigation. After reliable information was released about the trip made last October by a group of judges, prosecutors, former public officials, and former federal agents, among others, the head of state offered a message on national television in which he announced that he will request that the Disciplinary Commission of the Council of the Judiciary initiate a criminal investigation. President Fernandez warned that impunity was coming to an end. And regarding the meeting of the officials at Lago Escondido, the president of Argentina, Alberto Fernandez, held a press conference at the Casa Rosada. The president assured that due to his commitment with the nation, he was able to curb corruption. However, he denounced that when the factors of power have negative influence on the state, the work done is lost. President Fernandez also denounced that private media took on the task of silencing the meeting between business persons and high-level officials linked to Macrismo. The Argentinian head of state called on the authorities to criminally investigate the facts related to the trip made by the government officials.
Que todos tomemos conciencia de la gravedad I hope that we all become aware of the seriousness of the facts. It hurts democracy because of the anti-republican promiscuity in which some businessmen, some judges, some prosecutors, and some officials behave. Until now, they feel untouchable. It is time for them to be held accountable for their actions. Convinced that we must say never again to practices that damage the institutionality of the republic. I have instructed the Minister of Justice, to appear before the Public Prosecutor's Office in order to request a criminal investigation into the facts related to the trip in question and especially those related to the financing of the trip.
Moreover, Argentinian President Alberto Fernandez regrets that private news media outlets will rather remain silent as to the meeting.
I have been extremely clear, and I decided to deliver this message from the presidential palace because it is evident that most private media outlets have decided not to report on what happened in this singular trip to the Lago Escondido.
Let's take a short break, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In the United Kingdom, the National Union of Railway, Maritime and Transport Workers announced new strikes after negotiations with the company Network Rail. In this context, the railway workers announced that the strike will take place from December 24th to the 27th. The union stated that the measure comes after they failed to reach an agreement with Network Rail, a company that owns and manages the infrastructure of most of the railway network in England, Scotland and Wales. The railway workers also demanded a gradual increase of 8% in wages over 2 years and assurances that there will be no layoffs until 2024. On Monday, the International Labour Organization says more than 1 in 5 people in the world experience a form of violence and harassment in the workplace. The survey shows nearly 31.8% of victims said they have been subjected to more than one form of violence and harassment, and 6.3% had experienced it in all 3 forms: physical, psychological, and sexual during their working life. Manuela Tomei, the ILO's Assistant Director General for Governance and Dialogue, confirms that the report also found psychological harassment to be the most common form of violence and that young women are twice as likely to report sexual violence than young men.
Those who seem to be more exposed to work-related violence and harassment are youth, migrant workers, as well as women and men in an employment relationship. However, there are important gender differences. For instance, young women are twice as likely as young men to report sexual violence and harassment.
Now we move on to other topics. Ukraine attacks on Russian airfields resumed this Tuesday. A drone caused a fire at the Kursk airfield in western Russia. The attack caused a fire in an oil tank inside the airport. According to the information provided by the governor of the region, Roman Stratovit, no fatalities or injuries have been reported at the facility. This Monday, the Russian Ministry of Defense denounced Ukraine for attacking with drones 2 other airports in Russian provinces, both far away from the border lines. Although the Russian defenses intercepted the drones, 3 soldiers were killed and 4 wounded in Ryazan, southeast of Moscow, the capital. And Russia's foreign ministry said Western countries are not keeping their promises on allowing Russian fertilizers access to international markets. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Vershinin said Moscow maintains contacts with the United Nations to ensure compliance with the agreements made on the access of agricultural products to global markets. Vershinin said that Western sanctions affect grain and fertilizer exports and violate the food pact between Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, and the UN. Despite statements by the United States and the European Union about the lifting of sanctions against Russian agricultural production, in reality, Russian producers continue to face obstacles and conditions prohibiting insurance, freight, and bank payments. On Monday, Russian President Vladimir Putin visited the Crimean Bridge and stressed the importance of a land road connecting Crimea with the rest of Russia amid continued threats from Ukraine. The head of state, accompanied by Deputy Prime Minister Murat Kunushkin, drove a car across the bridge, including the lane repaired after Ukraine's terrorist attack in October. Kunushkin reported to the Russian leader how the roadway had been restored, how many people had been involved in the process, and that work still had to be done. On October the 8th, the landmark Crimean Bridge connecting the peninsula to Russia's mainland was damaged as a result of the terrorist attack, which Moscow believes was carried out by the Ukrainian special services.
Se trata del primer desplazamiento.
Parts of Kenya have experienced 4 consecutive seasons of insufficient rain the past 2 years, with dire effects for people and animals, including livestock. The worst affected ecosystems are home to some of Kenya's most visited national parks and reserves, including the Amboseli, Tsavo, and Laikipia Samburu areas. Unprecedented dry spells in 40 years have decimated East Africa's food and water resources. Wildlife has therefore begun to clash with local farmers as animals invade their crop fields and small water pools. Elephants sadly stand out on this drought-driven vandalism. Experts feared for the safety of both starving animals looking for food and the farmers who defend their crops from them. This is undoubtedly the kind of problems environmental imbalance can bring about if climate change continues to go unanswered. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. The authorities of the Democratic Republic of the Congo have raised the death toll in the massacre committed by the insurgent group M23 to 2,272. According to recent statements by the Minister of Industry, Julian Paluku, the number of victims of the rebel group M23 killed in the eastern province of Kivu. Although the rebel group has denied any responsibility for the events, Paluku, spokesperson for the national government, assures that witnesses corroborate the intervention of the armed community alone. They left more than 150 dead, all civilians, and many of them children and women. In Sudan, coup generals and main pro-democracy groups signed framework agreement until upcoming elections. The deal pledges to establish a new civilian-led transitional government to guide the country to elections and offers a path forward in the wake of Sudan's stalled transition to democracy following the October 2021 coup. The deal, the first of at least 2 planned accords, was signed by Sudan's 2 ruling generals, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, and the leaders from the country's largest pro-democracy group, Forces of Freedom and Change, at the Khartoum Republican Palace. According to the draft, the deal envisions Sudan's military state step back from politics. The agreement also stipulates that the revolutionary forces that signed the deal will decide upon a new prime minister to oversee a 2-year transition, a 24-month period that begins after a premier is appointed. Rail services resumed in Nigeria on Monday, 8 months after assailants attacked a train with explosives and gunfire, killing 7 people and abducting dozens of passengers. A handful of passengers and armed security personnel were aboard the first trip from Abuja to neighboring Kaduna State. Authorities have attributed the brazen March attack to the state armed groups that have been kidnapping people for ransom in northwestern Nigeria. The train service is a key mode of transport for many residents on the Nigerian capital, as the main road is into the city is plagued by kidnappings, and not many can afford to travel by air. The train from Abuja to Kaduna was frequently used by people moving between the states for work and business. In Sierra Leone, fuel shortages hindered transport services, forcing drivers to resort to the black market. Long queues continue at the country's main gas stations due to the high gasoline prices and fuel shortages. Likewise, citizens who provide cab services and drive motorcycles and tricycles are forced to resort to the black market, where fuel costs 50% more than in the conventional gas stations, leading them to increase their fares. In this regard, Sierra Leone faces high inflation and a declining economy. South Africa's ruling African National Congress Party says it will vote against any attempts to impeach President Cyril Ramaphosa in Parliament on Tuesday. Briefing the media Monday following a meeting of its National Executive Committee that discussed Ramaphosa's situation, the party's Treasurer General Paul Mazale said it will not support the report which calls for impeachment proceedings. The ANC's National Executive Committee, with 86 members, is the party's highest decision-making body and has the power to force the president to resign and to instruct its lawmakers on how to vote on various matters. The ANC still maintains a majority of seats in parliament, enough to block a vote by all opposition parties to begin impeachment proceedings against Ramaphosa.
Continues with his duties as President of the ANC and the Republic, but the NEC agreed that the President must proceed to be held accountable. So he'll take the matter on review. He will subject himself to other processes of the Integrity Commission. There's another process of the Hawks and the Public Protect. Those processes are going to continue. But the NEC did not take a decision that the president should step down.
And just as the hearts of millions of fans live the emotions of the Qatar 2022 World Cup, TeleSUR joins this sporting event with From the Field, a show that brings news, analysis, reviews, and more to our audience. Don't miss it. Our show airs 1 p.m. local time in Caracas and 12 p.m. New York. Remember, From the Field, only on TeleSUR. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.